Other things, choose city council members and a new mayor. There are currently 17 people running for mayor. As the current mayor, Michael Hancock, has reached his term limit. The candidates are debating tonight at Regis University. CBS News Colorado, proud to be the media sponsor for the big night. We take you right now to Regis University.
Good evening, and welcome to Regis University for tonight's Denver mayoral debate. My name is Jenna Farley, and I am the Director of Community Relations here at Regis. Before I review some of the logistics for tonight, let me introduce you to the President of Regis University, Dr. Salvador Aceves. President Aceves.
Good evening and welcome to Regis University. My name is Salvador Aceves and I am Regis's new president. One of the candidates to my left will soon be the new mayor of Denver. We are grateful to they and you who are here. We are especially pleased to present this debate because dialogue and conversation are long-standing bedrocks of Jesuit Catholic principles. Our founder, St. Ignatius of Loyola, advised listening closely to all sides in order to hear beyond our own biases. This does not mean that we avoid disagreement, but rather it invites us to inquiry, reflection, curiosity, and a commitment to assuming goodwill in others. Let us all reflect thoughtfully tonight and listen to their visions for our community. Buenas noches y bienvenidos a la Universidad de Regis. Soy Salvador Aceves, el nuevo presidente de Regis. Uno de los candidatos será el nuevo alcalde de Denver. Estamos agradecidos a ellos y a ustedes que nos acompañan. Es un honor presentarlo y la conversación son principios católicos jesuitas. Nuestro fundador, San Ignacio de Loyola, aconsejó escuchar atentamente a todas las perspectivas más allá de nuestros propios prejuicios. Esto no significa que evitamos el desacuerdo, sino nos invita a la reflexión, la curiosidad y el compromiso de asumir la buena voluntad en los demás. Reflexionemos esta noche sobre las diferentes visiones para nuestra comunidad. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our director again of Community Relations, Jenna Farley, who will begin the proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Aceves. Tonight, I'm pleased to share that Ana Varela is providing Spanish language interpretation for the audience here, and I will let Anna tell you more about that.
Thank you, Jenna. My name is Ana Varela. You will see me over there in the corner with some Spanish language interpretation equipment. Para los que hablan español o necesitan traducción al español, voy a estar en esa mesa allí a la esquina. Sé que se complica un poco. ¿Alguien en este momento con subir la mano necesita interpretación al español? Perfecto. Para los que estén en línea, van a poder ver esto con subtítulos en línea en CBS Colorado. Cualquier pregunta debido al español, encuéntrenme o hablemos después de la presentación. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you, Ana. And thanks to all of you for joining us for this Educated Voter Series event, where our goal is always to help voters make informed decisions. We're not here to endorse anyone, we're here to educate. But before we get started, it's really important to thank our partners, volunteers, and co-sponsors who've made tonight possible. First, thanks to Regis Event Services, ITS, Marcom, and physical plant teams for their work to get this space ready for us this evening. Thanks to our North Denver Coalition of co-sponsors and the individuals who have been working behind the scenes for months to make this tonight a success. The registered neighborhood organizations are, it's important for me to name them. We've got Berkeley Regis, Chafee Park, Harkness Heights, Highlands, Jefferson Park, Sunnyside, West Colfax, and West Highland. Thank you so much for your work on this evening. Additional thanks to our media partners, Denver North Star newspaper, and to CBS Colorado, which is providing the live streaming services tonight and sharing the video on their website and app for those of you who cannot attend in person. And finally, I'd like to introduce you to tonight's brave moderator, Dominic Dezzutti. Dominic, a Regis alumnus born and raised in Denver, is an experienced media, politics, and communications professional who spent 25 years as an Emmy Award-winning content creator and strategist with PBS 12. He recently launched Dizzuti Media Solutions, his own media and communications consulting firm. And as I've said before, anyone who gets to work with Dominic in this capacity is already on the path to success. Dominic, thank you for moderating tonight's very exciting and unprecedented debate. We truly are in great hands. Dominic.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you, everybody. I want to thank all of our audience, both here live and in person at Regis University, everyone joining us online. Thanks to our partners with CBS News Colorado for joining us for really is what is an historic event. I don't know about you, but the last time I saw a debate with 16 candidates for the city, for the mayor of Denver, I can't remember when it would ever happen before. So you're part of making history. And last but not least, I want to thank our candidates. Please join me in welcoming our candidates and thanking them for being here tonight. Let's get to some important facts for all of our audience to know. First and foremost, Election Day is April 4th, and the ballots will begin mailed out to all of Denver on March 13th. Now, if no candidate wins more than 50% of that election on April 4th, there will be a runoff of the top 2 candidates on June 6th. Let's also get into the ground rules for tonight's debate. First and foremost, we will have 5 different topics with 4 questions each. Now, we will not ask each question to each and every candidate. That's 16 answers to all those questions that get a little tiresome. However, we will call upon 4 candidates to answer each question within each topic. Each candidate will be heard for an answer for every topic. We'll go through, we'll also have some yes/no questions throughout the debate. There will also be a closing statement. There will not be an opening statement. The closing statement will be 1 minute so that our audience knows if you have 16 candidates, we only have the room for 2 hours, the answers will be 30 seconds. So they will be getting a time cue here in front of them from our timekeepers. They'll also hear from me if they've gone over so that you'll know in our audience here and at home if they're staying on time. Finally, there's also, when you have 16 candidates, you need to get pretty creative when it comes to rebuttals. And our secret for rebuttals this time will be these 3 little blue cards. The reason they're important is each of these represent a 30-second opportunity for our candidates. At the end of each question, I will ask if anyone has a rebuttal. They can then offer that. You'll see most questions at the podium closest to me, and then the podium furthest from me will be the rebuttals. There are only 3 rebuttal cards for each candidate, and these also count if you wanted to refute a rebuttal. So once those 3 are exhausted, that's it. Then we'll get to our closing statements. That's how it's going to go tonight. We're so grateful that you're here. We have welcomed our candidates. Let's get started. Let me do one more ground rule I've mentioned to our live audience here. I'm going to mention to our audience online as well. We have asked our audience to, out of respect to our candidates and everything they have to say, that they remain quiet throughout the debate. They've had a chance to welcome our candidates. They'll have a chance to thank our candidates at the end. Until then, the only voices we'll hear are from our candidates and myself. Okay, let's get started. Our first topic tonight will be affordable housing. The first candidate that will join us for their answer is Trinidad Rodriguez. Trinidad, our first question in affordable housing is this. Regis University will send hundreds of graduates into the world later this spring, but very few of them will be able to afford to stay in Denver after graduation. What do you plan to do to help more young people be able to afford to establish lives here in Denver?
Thank you for the question. My vision for affordability in Denver is to start by accelerating the delivery of more different types of housing, diverse supply and more total supply. Having spent 3 years working on our current version of Blueprint Denver, volunteering my time, we set forth plenty of opportunity to do that. We also need to work on opportunities to boost total income. That is pathways where people can invest in themselves and their knowledge.
Thank you. That was Trinidad Rodriguez. Do we have a rebuttal? Thank you. Robert Tretta with a rebuttal.
Yes, my question for Trinidad would be, since you were in charge of Blueprint Denver, tell us more about why ADUs were not considered during the Blueprint Denver drafting period. It would have added a lot of density to the city, and now the city council is backpedaling now on the issue of having ADUs available for the whole city of Denver entirely. Why was that not considered?
Denver City Council was actually working on implementing ADUs, and at the time, including in the neighborhood I grew up in West Denver, it was a pilot program. The assurance that was given to the Blueprint Denver task force was that the results of the pilot, the project was ongoing. But let's get to the real issue, which is our cost of housing has gone up by twice as much over the last 10 years as our incomes. Let's focus on income. That can't be taken away from people.
Okay, thank you. Further rebuttals? Let's move on to our next candidate. Next candidate is Leslie Herod. Leslie, the question again, what do you plan to do to help more young people be able to afford to establish lives in Denver?
Well, as someone who came to Denver as a young person right out of college, I will say firsthand I would not be able to hold elected office in Northeast Denver if I had to pay the prices that we have to pay today. It is extremely important that we have more diverse housing stock so young people can become first-time home buyers and build generational wealth so they can get on their way. We do that by having, yes, more diverse housing stock. Also, by using Denver's land owned by Denver, DPS, and RTD to build diverse housing across the city and county of Denver so that you can afford to live here and thrive.
Thank you, Leslie. Rebuttal? Robert Tretta, that's your second rebuttal.
Do you think that the city and county of Denver is building housing in a cost-effective way? And explain to me how exactly they are doing that.
It's a question, Leslie, you can decide to use one of your rebuttals or we can move on. Okay. Thank you. We'll be moving on. Any further rebuttal? The next candidate will be joining us is Thomas Wolf. Thomas, your question, what do you plan to do to help more young people be able to afford to establish lives in Denver?
So what's driving the cost is an imbalance in supply and demand. There's too much demand chasing not enough supply. Supply is being constrained by a number of things. One, at the state level, is the builder risk liability, which needs to be diminished. And it's also, now I lose my train of thought, also tied to how slow things get through planning and zoning at the city. That needs to be expedited, and anything else that is an impediment to getting more product out on the market.
Thank you. Robert, your next rebuttal. This is your last card.
Yeah, I know about supply and demand, and I know about the permitting problem that is going on right now. And it's been going on for 15 years. And it's severely impacting inventory on the market. People are having to wait a whole year for a building permit that used to take 1 day. So therefore, taking a lot of inventory off the market, I'd like to know what you're going to do about that. How are you going to remake the building department? What are your plans for that?
Sure. In financial analysis, a lot of it anymore is done through AI and machine learning. So that's a lot trickier to do a balance sheet of an entire corporation. I think a lot of those tools can be enacted for the city permitting process. The city permitting process should be the last step, and it should be really kind of a rubber stamp. The people that are capitalizing this development are taking the risk. Their feet are being held to the fire by their capital providers and all of the other liability associated with that to get it done. The city needs to streamline that entire process.
Thank you. Further rebuttal? Let's get to our next candidate for the same question. Debbie Ortega is our next candidate. Debbie, the question again, what do you plan to do to help more young people be able to afford to establish lives in Denver?
So one of the first things I would do is address the permitting problem. We have many affordable housing projects in the pipeline waiting to get their permits. So that needs to be fixed, number one. I want to see the city of Denver do manufactured housing and be able to do that on public lands where we can bring the costs down by 40%. We could do both for sale and rental housing, creating wealth building and opportunities for young people from not just Regis, but across our city who have left our city and want to come back and live here.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Terrence Roberts, rebuttal. The first one, we'll go to Moore.
Yes, my question to Ms. Ortega will be, what are your thoughts about more public/social housing and bringing a public banking system to pay for it for students that go here for Regis or our unhoused neighbors? And what have you done about it since you've been on city council for all of these years?
So I've been part of some of the conversations that have been held in the community around public banking. I think a percentage of Denver's dollars can be used to explore that. Obviously, some of Denver's money is already tied up in other banks, but I think this is an opportunity for us to look at how we can do things differently and help bring some of that affordable housing online and couple it with other dollars that are within our city coffers, because it takes a lot of stackable dollars to be able to bring online affordable housing.
Thank you. For the rebuttal, I saw Ian Thomas Tafoya first.
Thank you. I just heard 4 people answer this question, and I don't think any of it was centered in human beings. If you're trying to talk to people in college about how they can get ahead, we have to do a couple things. We have to begin financial literacy from the very beginning so that people are preparing to buy the homes that they'd like to live in our communities. We need to invest in nonprofits that do this kind of financial literacy. It's incredibly important that we do that. We also need to create programs within the city that allow us to hire great people out of college and have incentives for them to work for us, like housing vouchers to be able to get into housing. So we have good jobs that are sitting empty. We have to fill them with these great graduates so they stay in Denver before we lose them.
Thank you. We had another rebuttal, I believe, Mr. Wolf, Thomas Wolf. This is your second.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask Debbie, I call me a skeptic, but I'm not sure when I've ever seen the city provision something and do it for 40% less than the free market. Can I have a specific example either on material or labor or land cost that gets a affordable housing or whatever type of housing stock you're talking about to the market at a 40% discount? That I'm interested.
Debbie, yes. You may choose to use your second rebuttal or not.
Yes, I will.
Okay.
So absolutely, there's a company in the UK by the name of Lattice that we've worked with who has come to Denver, talked to city council, who can bring that housing, it's manufactured housing, similar to the way a car is built in a factory, and that's where you get the cost built down. And then when you put it on public land, you can get it cheaper than 40%. So this is what I plan to do. We actually have a site we've been working on with some people in Weld County, and that's one of the things I will bring forward.
Thank you. Further rebuttal? We'll move to our next question within the same affordable housing topic. The first candidate for this question is Lisa Calderon. Lisa, what concrete steps will you take to provide more affordable housing for the people of Denver?
Many of those here tonight are my students, and so when I think about renting, I think of them. A great majority of them are renters, including about half of Denverites. So we really need to strengthen renters' rights, including just cause evictions. We need to make sure that we have a permanent fund to assist people in paying their rent. The other thing is we want to keep our elders in their homes as well. We need to do something about bad acting HOAs who are taking housing without a fair process, and we need to be able to do it without going through the court system.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Next candidate will join us is Jim Walsh. Jim, same question. What concrete steps will you take to provide more affordable housing for the people of Denver?
So I think that this question is, we should be asking something else. The question we need to be asking is, why do we have such a massive disparity of wealth in this city? Why? And so my efforts as mayor would be to be an ally to people who need resources, which means union density. It means a universal basic income program that's expanded. It means a minimum wage that's a living wage, and on and on and on.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Next candidate will be joining us is Ian Thomas Tafoya. Ian, question, what concrete steps will you take to provide more affordable housing for the people of Denver?
I'd like to start by just welcoming others to go onto our website, take a look at what our housing plan is. It's going to be impossible for us to get in 30 seconds concrete plan. What I will say is the city has plans, and I'm tired of the city not putting their plans into action. Consultants get paid millions of dollars every few years to come and remake a plan instead of us actually putting it into action. I want to invite you all and the community leaders who have been doing this work to come to the table and let's bring these plans into action. We also need more financing. I agree with Terrence Roberts that we need to have public banking among other financial resources.
Thank you. Rebuttal? The next candidate will join us for this question is Terrence Roberts. Terrence, the question, what concrete steps will you take to provide more affordable housing for the people of Denver?
Okay, people of Denver, we need to understand that affordable housing is owned by developers. We have nearly 20,000 empty affordable housing units in our metro area. We need more public/social housing. For this last administration, the last 12 years, that's all we've been talking about is affordable housing. We need more public housing to add more stock for people who can't pay for it. We need rent controls as soon as Mr. Polis is able to do that at the state level. We need to bring rent controls at a municipal level. And we need to make sure that, I'm done, but more public housing.
Thank you. 30 seconds does go by quick, so thank you very much for sticking to that. We will give, yes, thank you very much. We have a rebuttal. Go ahead, Debbie Ortega. And Debbie, this is your third rebuttal.
So I am on the board of a nonprofit housing development organization, have been for many years, and our nonprofits play a huge role in bringing online affordable housing. We've been doing that for many, many years and have over 1,000 units in the city of Denver. So I agree, we have a lot of private developers building housing, but our nonprofits are the ones who are doing the lowest AMI levels, the area median income levels, for people in our community who need it. And we don't just need housing for people at the low end, we need the missing middle, which is a huge part of what the next mayor is going to have to solve.
Do you wish to use your second rebuttal?
No.
Okay. We will move on. We'll be going to any further rebuttal? We'll be moving on to our third question within the affordable housing topic. Our first candidate to join us will be Kwame Spearman. We often hear about affordable housing programs for those earning well below the area median income. But what steps should be taken to make housing more attainable for the missing middle, those earning between $60,000 and $80,000 a year, or 80 to 120% of the AMI? And for our audience, Denver's area median income is about $73,000 for one person, $83,000 for two.
Thank you. As a small business owner, this is a great question for me. We need a dedicated program focused on workforce housing. If you are a teacher, a nurse, a bookseller, a police officer, a firefighter, you can no longer live in Denver, Colorado. As the son of a teacher, that's absolutely unacceptable. We've got to go into each of our neighborhoods and understand how we can put workforce housing, exactly as Dominic said, 60 to 120% AMI. These housings should be subsidized by the city to influence developers to get it done, and in coordination with our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Next candidate will join us for, any rebuttals? Next candidate will join us for this question is Renata Behrens. Renata, again, the question, what steps should be taken to make housing more attainable for the missing middle, those earning between $60,000 and $80,000 a year?
Could you please repeat the question?
Of course. What steps should be taken to make housing more attainable for the missing middle, those earning $60,000 to $80,000 a year?
I cannot influence the earnings, but I have some ideas about creating apartments. We have many very old brick buildings, factories or something like that, and it's an easy take to make apartments out of that. And for the young people in Denver, I would like to change the rules about mother-in-law apartments so that everybody who has enough ground can add 1 or 2 apartments to his single home.
Thank you. Any rebuttal? The next candidate to join us for this question is Robert Tretta. Robert, what steps should be taken to make housing more attainable for the missing middle, those earning between $60,000 and $80,000 a year?
I love this question. Okay, I don't know where to begin. I don't have much time to really talk about this, but I'm willing to talk more about it afterwards. You know, you kind of got a gist of it with the ADUs. We missed it. We were too late. Now the city council is trying to undo and add ADUs citywide. It would have solved the problem 10 years ago. But here we are. Now we got to fix it. Now we have to figure out something else. And this is just the beginning of,
thank you.
You know, thank you.
Thank you. Any rebuttal? Okay, thank you. Leslie?
You know, I just want to make clear that the state of Colorado has already opened the door for middle-income housing. Just this past year, I passed the middle-income housing authority at the state level to make sure we had more housing for nurses, firefighters, teachers. And additionally, we put in over $700 million at the state level into affordable housing. But Denver has refused to come to the table to pull down those dollars. In fact, we have created communities in mountain towns for our snowplow drivers, so they had somewhere to live while they were doing their jobs. But we can't do that here in Denver. It's unacceptable, and we can change that.
Thank you, Leslie. Robert, you've exhausted your rebuttals.
Okay. Oh, I cannot respond to that?
Yeah, you've exhausted that. I know it's tough rules. 16 candidates, it's hard to get through. We only have the room to 8:30. We'll be going to our fourth candidate for this question, Andy Rougeau. Andy, again, the question, what steps should be taken to make housing more attainable for the missing middle, those earning between $60,000 and $80,000 a year?
Housing is unaffordable right now in our city. It's unaffordable for people like a waitress I met living in Platt Park who's commuting from 45 minutes out of town every day. She couldn't drop her kids off at school to make it to work on time. As mayor, I will fix a broken permitting department. As mayor, I will make sure we get rid of regulations that are adding costs to building new housing. As mayor, I will make sure that we are appropriately using our zoning decisions and not letting corruption and money get in the way in the process. I will fight for our future to make sure people like my children can live in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Rebuttals. Moving on to the fourth question. Excuse me, Renetta, did you have a rebuttal? Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
There is a question, who profits from the people who work here in Denver? So we can ask the employers to create apartments for their employees. In Europe, it is being done for a long, long time, and the employers have to do their part too. Thank you.
Thank you. Further rebuttal? Moving on to the last question within the affordable housing topic. Our first candidate to join us for this question is Mike Johnston. Mike, if state allows, would you support any form of rent control measures? If so, which types and why? If not, why not?
Thank you. I don't think rent control is the right answer to this problem. I'll tell you what I think is the right answer to this problem is what we can do is we can build 25,000 permanently affordable units in this city. And what that means is that anybody who lives in one of those units never has to pay more than 30% of their income to rent. And that means your rent never goes up unless your income goes up. But you can finance those through Proposition 123, which I passed at the ballot last year. What we also know we need to do is make sure that we can speed up the permitting process, make it be done in 90 days. We can help people get access to home ownership through down payment assistance, and we can make sure we keep rents down long term with this proposal.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Lisa? Lisa Calderon with a rebuttal.
We absolutely need rent control measures. We need a variety of rent stabilization. As rents are going up year after year, renters don't have rights to stop that. What we hear are the voices of the apartment association lobby and also the real estate lobby in trying to keep rents not regulated. So, you know, I used to be able to afford a 2-bedroom apartment when I was a single parent. That is not a reality here for people today. So we need to do more for renters.
Thank you, Lisa Calderon. Further rebuttal? Our next candidate answering this question is Chris Hansen. Chris, if state law allows, would you support any form of rent control measures? If so, which types and why? If not, why not?
Yeah, thank you. I don't believe rent control is the answer, and here's why. We are 40 to 60,000 units behind in Denver right now. We are massively behind in being able to have accessible and affordable housing, and rent control in every city that's been used in immediately stops the creation of new supply. It stops investment. Instead, I want to do what we did with the state government last year, put in $700 million to help incentivize new development, make sure it's affordable, make sure we get these projects done, and fix the permitting backlogs in Denver. That's how we catch up. That's how we help people find housing.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Terrence Ross for rebuttal.
Where's the $750 million going to come from? Because it cannot come from our public, it cannot come from our public safety budget or from our general fund.
Chris, you may choose to use rebuttal. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I'll go ahead and respond to that. I think this is a super important point, and the reason I want to use one of my rebuttals because we are putting in public money from the state budget that I helped craft and helped lead last year on the Joint Budget Committee. Exceptional, once in a lifetime opportunity with federal and state money for us to accelerate new housing. And here's the great news. We use a small amount of public money to leverage a huge amount of private investment. And that's where we get 20-to-1 ratios. That's how we catch up. That's how we address this huge supply issue that has pushed up prices for everybody in the city. That's, I think, the best plan to go forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Further rebuttal? Moving forward, next candidate for this question is Kelly Bruff. Kelly, if state law allows, would you support any form of rent control measures?
Rent control hasn't worked in any city who's tried it yet, so I would not. Instead, what I would focus on is we have serious office space downtown that we need to transition to residential. I would incentivize that transition and bring on large numbers of units that can impact price and help stabilize rent. In addition, since I still have time, I would build on publicly owned property for sale condos so the missing middle hardworking families would get the chance to own in our city and begin to build wealth again.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Final candidate for this question is Aurelio Martinez. Aurelio, if state allows, would you support any form of rent control measures?
Well, yes, I agree that there has to be some form of rent control. Rent control has to be in a form when the city contracts with developers that developing, when they want to get the incentives, we have numbers where they have to have affordable housing in their development. We have to also have rent control within that development for a certain percentage, so that the renters could go in there and not be outraised, have high rents where they can't afford to live there. There has to be a cap in that situation. Yes.
Thank you, Aurelio. Rebuttal? Mike Johnston.
I think there's one other very important thing we can do for renters, which is what we want to do is help renters build wealth so they can actually become homeowners. So what I would do in these 25,000 affordable units that we would build is when those renters pay their rent every month, instead of putting that money into the pockets of out-of-state investors, we actually change the financing so that money can go back into the pockets of renters. That means every time you're paying the rent, you're actually saving $100 that goes back into a savings account you can use to either prepare for a down payment, to put a kid through college, to open a small business. We have to build a bridge for renters to go from renting to owning, and that's what I do as mayor.
Thank you. As Mike Johnston. Further rebuttal? Lisa? Lisa Calderon with her next rebuttal.
Rent control doesn't exist in a vacuum. It has to be part of an entire transfer of wealth system. So in addition to rent control, we also need the good paying jobs. We need union jobs. We need protections for workers from retaliation. So we need to look at the whole system. No, rent control alone can't do it, but when it's part of transformational policies to shift wealth and racial inequities, then absolutely it can work.
Thank you. Any other rebuttal? Okay. We'll be moving on to our next topic, fresh set of questions and fresh order of candidates. The next topic is homelessness. The first candidate for the first question will, and actually before we ask the question, let me, just one point of order that I should announce to our audience. There is a 17th candidate on the ballot. An invitation was issued to Al Gardner. He is not with us today. So while we advertised for 17, we thought we'd have 17, we have 16, and that's the reason we have an empty chair on the stage. Now moving forward. Homelessness is our next topic. Our first question, the first candidate to answer will be Andy Rougeau. Andy, our first question is, what are the most important steps the city of Denver can take to address mental health needs of the unhoused?
So homelessness is out of control in our city. We've seen a nearly doubling of unsheltered homeless in the past 4 years. We need to enforce our camping ban. We need to enforce our camping ban to get people who are dealing with severe mental health or severe drug addiction issues into the service they need. When I walk to the park behind my house with my 3-year-old in my arms, we will see a man with his pants around his ankles using his restroom. It is not compassionate to let that happen. It's not compassionate to step over someone sitting in a tent in the streets. The compassionate thing to do is to get those people into the mental health and drug addiction service they need in our shelter system. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebuttal? The next candidate that will join us for this question is Aurelio Martinez. Aurelio, the question is, what are the most important steps the city of Denver can take to address the mental health needs of the unhoused?
Well, first of all, we have to make our mental health facilities accountable. We need to make sure that they're doing their job and they're not just doing. Mental issues come in every stages. A person could get in a fight with their wives, they can get a divorce, they can lose a family member, and they have mental issues. We have to be able to treat mental illness effectively and efficiently. If not, we have to get new facilities for Denver. Thank you.
Thank you. Aurelio Martinez. Rebuttal? The next candidate that will join us for this question is Chris Hansen. Chris, the question is, what are the most important steps the city of Denver can take to address the mental health needs of the unhoused?
This is a moment for Denver to really take stock of where we are with our response to the homelessness crisis. And the mental health issue is a big piece of that, of course, addiction issues as well. This is a moment to really reevaluate. We're going to spend $250 million, $250 million this year on different aspects of responding to this crisis, and we're seeing a negative result. The numbers are getting worse in our streets, not better. So this is a moment to reevaluate, use evidence-based programming and budgeting like I've done at the state level to make sure we're spending our money very carefully and with effect, and we absolutely have to enforce Denver's camping ban to make progress. Thank you.
That's Chris Hansen. Rebuttal? Leslie?
Thank you. You know, I think a lot of folks are talking about what we can do around, or that we need more mental health instead of talking about what we've done to create more mental health. I'm proud to have created Caring for Denver, the state's largest mental health organization now in the state of Colorado, giving out over $100 million worth of mental health and substance misuse services for those in Denver who need them. In our program, and the folks that we have funded, 86% of people have not returned to prison or the streets when they get services. That's what we need to do. Additionally, I worked with others in this room to create STAR, Support Team Assisted Response, and we'll come back to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's Leslie Herod. Further rebuttal. Debbie, I'm sorry, you're out of rebuttals.
So because they were against me, they count against me?
I know it's an imperfect process, but it's with 16 candidates, we do our best. Other? Jim? Jim Walsh with a rebuttal.
I think this issue has to begin with ending blaming of unhoused people for their situation. So how can we help the mental health of people who are unhoused? We can stop sweeping them. We can stop criminalizing them. We can stop jailing them. We can invite unhoused voices to tables that make policy.
Thank you, Jim Walsh. Further rebuttal? Trinidad Rodriguez? Nope. Okay. Request pulled. Any further rebuttal? The last candidate will join us for, sorry. Renata, please go ahead. Thank you.
We can change the divorce laws so that nobody who is the weaker part in a divorce gets homeless. And homelessness is our problem that we cause, not the homeless people. Thank you.
Thank you. That's Renata Behrens. Further rebuttal. The last candidate for this question under homelessness is Ian Thomas Tafoya. Ian, the question again, what are the most important steps the city of Denver can take to address the mental health needs of the unhoused?
The most important thing we can do when you talk to people who work in mental health services is to create stability in housing. People need continuity of care. It's proven time and time again. If you talk to a social worker and they find somebody and get them into services, and then they're in outpatient care, and 5 months later or 5 weeks later or 5 days later, they have to move to another place, their property is destroyed, their licenses are missing. It's impossible for us to have continuity of care. We have the money and the resources for mental health services. We have to create stability in housing for individuals. I presented a plan to do this to the mayor during the pandemic.
Thank you, Ian. That was Ian Thomas Tafoya. Rebuttal? Moving forward to our next question under the homelessness topic, our first candidate for this question is Debbie Ortega. Debbie, what steps, if any, should Denver take to eliminate unsanctioned encampments?
So first thing, I want to make it really clear that we have $40 million a year that we get in mental health dollars and $40 million over an 18-year time frame of opioid abatement dollars. We have to be using these dollars wisely in addressing the needs of individuals who are unhoused in our community. And we also need to be looking at single-room occupancy housing as one of the tools for people who come out of homelessness, who get into housing and need that community environment.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Next candidate will be answering this question is Jim Walsh. Jim, the question, what steps, if any, should Denver take to eliminate unsanctioned encampments?
So I taught many years early in my career here at Regis, and I have a deep understanding of the Regis philosophy of education based around the question, how ought we to live? And I think this is the question for an entire society when it comes to folks who are most vulnerable. And that means ending the criminalization of people and getting people housing. There are societies, countries, cities in the U.S. who have done this successfully. We have models we can follow.
Thank you. That was Jim Walsh. Rebuttal? The next candidate joining us for this question is Kelly Bruff. Kelly, what steps, if any, should Denver take to eliminate unsanctioned encampments?
I've made a commitment to end unsanctioned encampments my first year in office. In essence, we have to stop sweeping people endlessly from neighborhood to neighborhood and instead get into safer locations. Temporarily, I'll create sanctioned camping sites so we can build, until we can build the housing and shelter we need. I won't do it alone. I'll do it with the region, focused on data and prevention so we can get ahead of this issue. 5 sitting mayors in the metro area have endorsed my homeless plan.
Thank you. That was Kelly Bruff. Next rebuttal. Andy Rougeau, rebuttal.
We've just heard multiple candidates with power in the city say the problem is not what they've been doing. We've heard multiple candidates say the status quo will work. That is wrong. We need to actually start enforcing our camping ban in our city to get the people into the mental health and drug addiction services they need. I talked to a woman at Platt Park whose brother suffered from schizophrenia. Every day when he was homeless, they prayed that he would be arrested so they have a chance for that family to connect with him again. We need to enforce our camping ban, and as mayor, I'll fight for our future by doing that.
Thank you. Andy Rougeau, rebuttal, Ian Thomas Tafoya.
Well, I'm grateful that now Kelly has decided to join us in deciding that ending the sweeping and finding solutions for people will really work. For the last 10 years, we have been doing the work. We've offered solutions to the mayor, and we've gone to the Denver Regional Council of Governments to bring them in. I'm really excited that you agree with us now, Kelly, and I'm happy to collaborate with you.
Ian Thomas Tafoya, further rebuttal. Kwame?
I think we need to reframe this conversation. There are 2 types of groups when we're thinking of our homeless population. There are people who the system is failing, and we've got to continue to innovate and offer services to those people. But there are also people who are exploiting the system. Hearing that sweeps don't work is bad leadership. A CEO would find that whomever was accountable for it and replace them. We have got to clean up our streets. Our businesses, our neighborhoods are dying, and it needs to happen right now.
That was Kwame Spearman. Further rebuttal. Lisa Calderon. This is your third.
I've been a 20-year provider of people who are unhoused, first with domestic violence victims for 12 years as a legal director, and then running the city's reentry program. We have to stop blaming people who are poor. 94% of the people who are surveyed on the street today want to be housed. So these mean-spirited attempts by keeping the camping ban when we know we have 10 years of data that it doesn't work. We have the worst homelessness than we've ever had. It's time to do research-based, and I would replace the sweeps with crisis intervention responders. Thank you.
Lisa Calderon. Further rebuttal, Kwame Smirman.
I am a small business owner. I own the Tattered Cover. Some of my employees are housing insecure themselves. We have to invest in innovation, but we also have to acknowledge that in this city right now, there are people who don't want to live in homes. We can build as many homes as we want, and if people do not want to go in those homes, we are going to have to make tough decisions to keep our streets clean. We need a leader who every day wakes up and has to make those tough decisions. But respectfully, I don't agree that every single person is in that situation simply because the system is failing them.
Thank you, Kwame. Kwame Spearman, the rebuttal. Further rebuttal, Aurelio Martinez.
I just want to say one thing, is we have to stop thinking shelters, 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 and we have to start thinking solutions, solutions, solutions. I had the opportunity to visit an assisted housing building, and what they do is their assisted housing isn't for handicap, and it isn't for, it's especially for the homeless. And what they do is they don't put them in a shelter, they bring them and they put a house under their feet so that they can gain.
Thank you. Thank you, brother. 30 seconds goes fast. Thank you, Aurelio. It's Aurelio Martinez, rebuttal. Kelly Bruff.
Am I rebuttal or am I?
This is rebuttal number one.
Yeah, do I go here because I started?
Next podium. There you go. A good question. You started the question. Go ahead.
Let's be really clear about it. To end unsanctioned camping, the courts are clear about this too. These are people who have no place to go. You must provide a safer place for them to go. So temporarily, we provide sanctioned camping locations until we can build the housing and shelter they need. And do it as a region so we are more effective and long-term have the real impact we want to have.
Thank you. It's Kelly Bruff. Further rebuttal. The next candidate that will speak on this question is Kwame Spearman. Kwame, it's a random order. The question again: what steps, if any, should Denver take to eliminate unsanctioned encampments?
I want to be super clear. Our portfolio right now of the organizations that are trying to help people is not doing or are not doing their job. I'm on the board of Urban Peak. They focus on people who are 14 to 24. Every single organization needs to have a specific focus on how they can help people, and we need to do a better job of giving people the option to go into those programs. But there are people on the streets right now who are not going to take that option. And we've got to make some choices on how we are going to get our city back on track.
Thank you. That's Kwame Spearman. Further rebuttal? Okay, well, moving on with our next question under the homelessness topic. Our first candidate to join us for this question is Leslie Herod. The question: does the city of Denver need to offer more drug and alcohol treatment options for the unhoused?
Absolutely. Again, this is why I created STAR. I want to back up and say that my sister spent 30 years in and out of the criminal justice system because of addiction, because of drug issues, and because we failed her. Right? If she would have gotten help from the beginning, she would not be in the system for 30 years, and the kids would not have been in child welfare, my nieces and nephews. We've got to provide more treatment services. Again, this is why I created STAR, Support Team Assisted Response. Now we have an alternative to 911. When someone is in a mental health crisis, we get an EMT and a mental health professional now in Denver. That is effective. We've got to provide more solutions for people who need them.
Thank you, Leslie Herod. Rebuttal? Kwame Spearman. Kwame, this is your third.
Leslie, though, with all due respect, the policies that you've championed over the past 3 years, whether it's decriminalization of fentanyl, whether it's making a misdemeanor from a felony to steal a vehicle, don't you think that has created a culture that is in our city right now in which more people are committing crime, they're committing violence, and quite frankly, they're engaging in homeless activity?
So you can choose to answer. This will be your third rebuttal.
Well, respectfully to our CEO, so is underpaying his employees so that they have to go into social housing in order to live in our city. I believe and know that the war on drugs is a failed war on drugs. What I did was defelonize simple possession of drugs. I did not legalize anything. What I will tell you is our failure as a city is not providing people with the services they need. If we want to reduce the fentanyl crisis and get after it, let's get people services and reduce that demand. Fentanyl is killing people today, regardless of if it's a felony or a misdemeanor. People are still using it and they're still dying. What are we going to do about it?
Thank you. Leslie Harrod, thank you. That was rebuttal. Further rebuttal? Trinidad? So Trinidad Rodriguez with rebuttal.
The legislation that's being referred to here treats fentanyl and carfentanil the exact same way in terms of penalties, yet carfentanil is 50,000 times more potent than fentanyl. You can make 50,000 times more street doses of fentanyl-infused drugs, and the penalties are treated the exact same way under this legislation. It was a terrible idea. It's failing our people, and it's tragedy.
Thank you. Further rebuttal? Moving forward, our next candidate for the same question is Lisa Calderon. Lisa, the question, does the city of Denver need to offer more drug and alcohol treatment options for the unhoused?
Absolutely, and I also want to give credit to the community organizers who helped to push for the STAR program, who researched it, the Denver Justice Project and Dasher. It was a lot of work for communities to come together. We also need to focus on trauma. When we talk about unhoused people, not everybody is drug addicted. Not everyone has mental illness. In fact, a lot of people are working people. They are in their cars. We need to expand the Safe to Park program. We need to have a continuum of options and not overly focus on the visible homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Next candidate join us is Mike Johnston. Mike, the question again, does the city of Denver need to offer more drug and alcohol treatment options for the unhoused?
Yeah, the reason why the current approach we're using is not working is you can't move people off of a street if you have no place for them to go. What we know we actually have to do is provide permanent supportive housing for people to move to. No one should be homeless in this city. We have a moral obligation to make sure everyone has a place to stay. And we can put an end to people having to sleep in parks and public places. The way we do that is by opening micro communities where you can put 40 to 60 tiny homes. I would build 10 to 20 of these around the city where people can have built-in wraparound mental health services, addiction treatment, workforce training to get back on your feet.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Andy Rougeau.
So the program Mike is talking about has failed. Social impact bonds, which is a program the city did, failed. The people who were put into housing straight off the street were more likely to die than people who stayed on the street. Think of that. Someone we took off of the street was more likely to die if we put them into housing because we didn't get them the mental health and drug addiction services we need first. We are wrong if we're treating this as a housing problem. This is a mental health and drug addiction problem. That's why we need to enforce the camping ban. And I promise, as mayor, I will fight for our future by doing that.
Thank you. Further rebuttal? Mike Johnson, this is your second.
Sure, because I think facts matter, so I'll come back. It turns out there's a myth that people that are homeless don't want access to services. When we opened this offering to people for 300 spots, 800 people signed up and said, yes, I want a house. And of those 300 people who were in housing, a year later, 86% of them were still successfully housed. We know this works. We know there are folks that are struggling, that are trying to get leg back up. And when you can put them into safe, stable, dignified housing with their own cot, their own kitchen, their own bed, their own place, they feel a sense of pride and opportunity. That's when they get back on their feet. That's what we can help people do.
Thank you. Further rebuttal? Moving forward, next candidate to answer this question is Renata Behrens. Renata, the question again, does the city of Denver need to offer more drug and alcohol treatment options for the unhoused?
I think so too, but generally said, most of the unhoused people are not mentally disturbed. They are just poor, they just had a divorce or something of that difficulty and cannot find a home. And I think for these people who are not mentally disturbed, they should have financial education, because not to being able how to do their finances, that's often the reason.
Thank you. It's Renata Behrens. Rebuttal? Jim Walsh?
Yeah, I think it's easy for people who have never experienced poverty to tell people who have that they just need financial literacy. And so I think what we need to be really talking about here is the people that know how to use resources or the people who have scraped and clawed their way to survival. And so we ought to bring those voices to the table.
Further rebuttal? Moving forward to our last question, the homelessness topic. The first candidate to join us for this last question is Robert Tretta. Robert, what is the most humane way to balance citizen private property rights and the rights of the unhoused?
Okay. Oh, it's a new question.
Yes, it is. Would you like it repeated?
Yes, I would like you to.
What is the most humane way to balance citizen private property rights and the rights of the unhoused?
Okay. We are spending entirely too much money on the homeless situation. Colorado Coalition for the Homeless will spend $50 million on a loft building downtown with taxpayer money. You do the math. It only holds maybe 100 people, chronically homeless people. I have a plan that'll do it for 10%. Watch me. I will do it. We need to start building immediately. Housing first, then drug addiction, and all the other things come next.
It's Robert Tretta. Rebuttal? Next candidate will join us is Terrence Roberts. Terrence, a question again. What is the most humane way to balance citizen private property rights and the rights of the unhoused?
So the first way to address that is to make sure that people do not have to live in people's doorways who own private property or who have small businesses, because when people are intruding on someone's private property rights, most of those places are people's small businesses. Have you seen the 16th Street Mall lately? We need to make sure that people have somewhere to go, to where they don't have to live outside, to where we don't have to have the issue of people intruding on people's property rights because they have their own property with more public/social housing.
Thank you. Terrence Roberts, further rebuttal. Moving forward, next candidate to join us is Thomas Wolf. Thomas, the question: what is the most humane way to balance citizen private property rights and the rights of the unhoused?
It has to be shelter. The existing folks that are elected and have been working on this, the law against encampments has been in place for 10 years and has not been enforced. I'm sure it was passed for the obvious reason. Here's an example. We have a old jail in town, which is habitable. It's warm, lit, and everything else. The most inhumane thing we can do is it's housing confiscated cannabis right now. It's the most inhumane thing we can do is not use that for that person on the street.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Last candidate to join us for this question and this topic, Trinidad Rodriguez. Trinidad, the question: what is the most humane way to balance citizen private property rights and the rights of the unhoused?
My plan is to, on my first day in office, declare an emergency with respect to people living and dying unhoused on our streets. 853 people have died in the last 5 years alone on our streets. This is personal for me. I remember when I was 11 years old and realized what it meant that my godfather was homeless with addiction. I thought, all I hope for him is that wherever he is, someone will protect him from himself and from others if he's vulnerable.
Thank you. Rebuttal. Okay, we'll be moving on to our next topic. So fresh set of questions, fresh order of candidates. The next topic of this debate is crime. Our first candidate to join us will be Renata Behrens. Renata, your question is: what are the most important steps to prevent youth crime and the growth of gangs in Denver?
Oh, I should know that. I don't know what to do about that. I don't have kids, and I'm not in that situation. But I am very sure that we, the parents and grandparents generation, that it is our fault that the younger ones become criminal. And thank you. And that's the one and only idea I have.
Thank you, Renata Behrens. Rebuttal? Moving on to our next candidate, Kelly Bruff. What are the most important steps to prevent youth crime and the growth of gangs in Denver?
We spend a lot of time talking about public safety as the response to 911. And the truth is, what really makes a community safe is all the other work we can do to reduce and prevent crime. We know access to economic opportunity, an excellent education, stable housing, support systems, and safety nets that really work for our community. Every member of my cabinet will have responsibility for making our communities and our neighborhoods safe, not just our police department.
Thank you. That's Kelly Bruff. Rebuttal? Aurelio? Aurelio Martinez with rebuttal.
That's an easy one for me. We got to restructure the administration to bring back youth activities so that they don't have to just sit in the park and do nothing. We have to bring back the activities that Denver had back years ago: soccer, basketball, softball, baseball, t-ball, for the things. Keep them active, give them an opportunity to do what they want, and you will stop and you will curb crime just by giving them something to do, giving them an opportunity.
Thank you. That was Aurelio Martinez. Further rebuttal? Kelly?
He just reminded me of when I was chief of staff, we had a summer with concern about gang violence. Instead of adding police officers, what we did was open our rec centers for free in 2007 to every kid under the age of 18. We saw a reduction in crime, both as victims of crime and as perpetrators of crime. To this day, our rec centers are free. I think we could continue to think about crime that way for our youth and think about how we position them not to have to make those choices.
Thank you. That was Kelly Bruff. Further rebuttal? Trinidad? They'll be your third? Okay. Trinidad Rodriguez?
I can't abide talking about crime as an alternative to earnings. The moment we start to really contemplate that crime is just an alternative to getting an education and that it's a moral equivalency is just absolutely wrong. My plan calls for building our police force ranks. Our police force is the same size it was in 1997, yet this city has grown by 50%. And we can grow it by recruiting people who are in the communities that need this safety.
Ms. Trinidad Rodriguez. Further rebuttal? Moving forward in this question, our next candidate is Lisa Calderon. Lisa, the question: what are the most important steps to prevent youth crime and the growth of gangs in Denver?
This is perfect because I teach race, crime, and law this evening. And first of all, we need to change from calling young people gang members. When they see themselves as being criminalized, they don't look at themselves as having a future. We need to also understand the drivers of pushing them into the system. By not having an access to a way out, one of the hardest populations to work with in my reentry programming was 18 and 24-year-olds because there was a gap in services. They're geared toward children or adults. We need more.
Thank you. That was Lisa Calderon. Rebuttal? Next candidate to join us will be Chris Hansen. Chris, the question: what are the most important steps to prevent youth crime and the growth of gangs in Denver?
Yeah, thank you. This is deeply personal for me. I'm father of 2 teenage boys. They're in DPS. They are facing this in their schools, seeing it in the neighborhoods. And I guess as we come out of this pandemic, one of the things I noticed so much was this disengagement of people feeling like, oh, we just got off a Zoom school, we get back to school, and a lot of the things we wanted at school, the activities, the ability to go to Big Brothers, Big Sisters, the rec centers, right? It got torn down, it got disconnected. We need to bring that back so much. The schools are part of this, the city's part of this. Re-engage our youth. That's how we increase safety. Thanks.
Thank you. Chris Hansen, rebuttal? Okay, thank you. Extra set of eyes, thank you, appreciate that.
This is more so of a statement than a rebuttal, since I am the only ex-gang member in the entire country running for such a high office municipal position. These kids need more dedicated youth centers, so I'm gonna go off of what Mr. Hansen and some of the other candidates said. Not the Carter Madison Center, rest in peace, Miss Madison. We need more dedicated youth spaces. We need to get the youth involved with the arts. Domestic violence is the #1 precursor to gang violence. It's not fathers that are missing. That is an old, antiquated, racist saying, and we need to make sure we have more dedicated art spaces for youth, for positive youth activities.
Thank you. That was Terrence Roberts with rebuttal. Further rebuttal? Okay, moving forward in the issue of crime to our next question. The first candidate taking on this next question is Leslie Herod. Leslie, your question is, what more can be done to prevent car thefts, whether it's in tire or catalytic converter, package thefts from porches, or other non-violent but expensive crimes?
Yeah. Well, this is an issue that is very concerning to me right now. We know that car thefts are up, carjackings are up right now in our city. In fact, I'm very worried that a lot of these young people that we were just talking about are the ones who are perpetrating some of these crimes, and they're holding people up, especially down in Cherry Creek and throughout our city. And unfortunately, I'm worried that one day someone's going to get killed unless we step in. We've got to break up the organized crime that's happening in Denver. These are rings, people. These are not just individual actors. There are rings here because people are not being, the crimes are not being investigated and people aren't being held accountable. We've got to have more investigators in the field. We've got to make sure the victims
Leslie.
get justice.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Next candidate will be taking on this question is Mike Johnston. Mike, what more can be done to prevent car thefts, whether it's entire or catalytic converter, package thefts from porches, or other non-violent but expensive crimes?
Yeah, I think no Denver resident should have to be afraid to walk in their own neighborhood or have to check out their window every night to see if their car is going to be there the next morning. And there are 3 key things we should do. One is this is the worst city in the country right now for auto theft, and yet we do not have a dedicated auto theft unit in our police department. I would create one. The second thing we need to do is we need to actually put more first responders onto the street. That includes mental health responders to respond to mental health crisis. That means EMTs to respond to physical health crisis, and it means officers to respond to real threats. So we don't have any more Denver residents calling 911 and being put on hold.
Thank you. It's Mike Johnston. Rebuttal? Next candidate joining us is Aurelio Martinez. Aurelio, what more can be done to prevent non-violent but expensive crime in Denver?
Well, first of all, we have to restructure the Department of Safety. We have to look at our police department. We have to look at our sheriff's department. And I'm saying that we have to adjust that budget so that it can be more effective. My whole plan is to put special patrols that will patrol the Central Business District, your neighborhoods, and different areas so that the police can do their job and serve and protect. That's what we need to do. So we don't need to think about defunding any police department. We think about enhancing it. Thank you.
Thank you. It's Aurelio Martinez. Rebuttal? Next candidate join us is Debbie Ortega. Debbie, what more can be done to prevent car thefts and other non-violent but expensive crimes?
First thing I would do is make sure we have a Metro Crime Task Force that is working around our region to address the drugs that are coming into our streets. They're in our schools. They're affecting our neighborhoods and people all across our city. I would also make sure that we're working to fund programs that are boots on the ground people who are working with our young folks and others who need those access to resources and services. We need programs like the Second Wind Fund that has been a program that is preventing kids who are committing suicide in our community.
Thank you. It's Debbie Ortega. Rebuttal? Moving on to our next question within the crime topic. This question is first to Terrence Roberts. Next question. Gun-related deaths in Denver were down last year, but gun-related injuries increased. What more can the city do to reduce violent crime?
So being a gunshot victim myself, I just spoke on my past. I was a gunshot victim in 1993 during the summer of violence. I was a gunshot victim again in 1994. We had 88 homicides last year in Denver. We had 96 the year before that, and we had 95 during COVID. We need to make sure that people don't feel like they have to use a gun. Gun violence is an epidemic of poverty, and we need to use our public safety budget to address the cycle of poverty. Housing is our main issue in Denver, and our violence issue stems from our housing.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Moving on, next candidate is Trinidad Rodriguez. Trinidad, same question. What more can the city do to reduce violent crime?
I've already talked about the first step in my plan, which is to grow our police force back, restore our ranks. The next step is to expand and invest in our specialized teams where we will actually achieve greater equity in policing by building trust, which we have to do, restoring trust between our community and our officers. We will start to make, our officers will be a trusted partner in fighting crime. That's the kind of city we need.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Next candidate joining us is Andy Rougeau. Andy, what more can the city do to reduce violent crime?
Violent crime is out of control in our city. We've seen almost a tripling of murders in the past 10 years. As mayor, I will make our city safer so my next door neighbor doesn't have someone try to pry open his door on Christmas Eve and has to huddle with his family on 911, a memory that we seared into their memories. As mayor, I'll add 400 police officers to our streets to make it safer. As mayor, I'll increase funding for our 911 system so you don't sit on hold. As mayor, I'll give better funding to our police so they can be properly trained. I will fight for our future as mayor by making our streets safer.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Next candidate join us is Kwame Spearman. Kwame, same question. What more can the city do to reduce violent crime?
We have got to start enforcing our laws. We've stopped. We've had 5 catalytic converters stolen from our van at Tattered Cover. If we don't enforce our laws, crime continues to escalate, and now we're starting to see that happen with violent crime. You've got to ask yourself, the people behind me, many of whom have been running this city, either the state legislator or at the city council, and they've taken actions that have decriminalized many, many important things, and crime is rising. You're right, I am a CEO, and I'm telling you that we need a leader to get us back on the right path.
Thank you, Kwame. Kwame Spearman, rebuttal. Moving on, the topic of crime, to our last question. Our first candidate that will join us is Ian Thomas DeFoya. Ian, the question is this. As shown by the several millions of dollars a year the city pays in settlements, Denver police still have an excessive force problem. What policies would you promote to reduce or ideally eliminate excessive force problems in the police department?
Excessive force is a huge issue. When the pandemic began and the civil unrest began, I actually was part of a group of people who immediately wrote the city. And the first thing I said is we need to be logging the non-lethal ammunition and the use of force by these people because that is a red flag for excessive force that costs our government money. It also harms people. This is centered in the impacts to people. There are a lot of suggestions that have been brought forward in the Reimagining Public Safety, over 112 of them. Again, 30 seconds isn't enough for us to get into all of them, but I support many.
Thank you, Ian Thomas DeFoya. Rebuttal? Next candidate is Robert Tretta. Robert, what policies would you promote to reduce or ideally eliminate excessive force problems in the police department?
We need to step up internal affairs. I don't know if anybody's been tracking the Memphis, what's going on down there. These police officers were reported, long before the incident happened. And if we had a real internal affairs department that listened to phone calls when you called them and said they're going to go talk to those officers, that will solve all of our problems, most of them.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Next candidate is Jim Walsh. Jim, what policies would you promote to reduce or ideally eliminate excessive force problems in the police department?
I would definitely expand the STAR program. I'm not sure who started that, but I've heard several people take credit for that, but I would expand that. Police training, de-escalation. De-escalation first and foremost. Mental health care, we talked about mental health care for unhoused people. What about mental health care for police as well? And very traumatic work. I'm uncomfortable also with the emphasis on heavy crime. I think historically that's been used to justify the remilitarization of police forces. So we have to be careful with that.
Thank you. Thank you. It's Jim Walsh. Rebuttal? Last candidate to join us is Thomas Wolf. Thomas, same question. What policies would you promote to reduce or ideally eliminate excessive force problems in the police department?
So police are a huge portion of our budget for safety, so we should know what we're getting. in the business world, you'd manage that employee. If they're creating that liability, that would come out of their budget, out of their department's budget. Currently, it comes out of the general fund. That's, there's no connection there. On this campaign, I've met with the new chief a number of times, and I haven't once heard him talk about how he's managed by our mayor. He works for us. We have to explain to him how we want to be policed and how he conducts safety for us.
Thank you. That was Thomas Wolf. Rebuttal? Okay, that concludes our topic of crime. Before we get to our next topic, we're going to do a couple of things. First, I want to provide an update. Earlier in the debate, I mentioned that Al Gardner, a candidate on the ballot, was invited but wasn't able to participate. We were able to receive a note from him, and I think it's a positive one that I wanted to share with our audience. This is directly from Al. My daughter gave birth to my granddaughter this evening after a difficult delivery. I made the choice to be with her and my son-in-law. I so hated to miss, but needed to be there for them. Thank you so much for inviting me. So we certainly, again, speak for our audience saying that we wish him and his new granddaughter the best. Also, this is a break in our debate where we're going to be doing some yes-no questions. What I'm going to ask the candidates to do is to stand so that everybody in our audience can see them. They can be clearly seen online, standing for yes, and then when they sit down, then standing for no. We'll do 8 yes or no questions. So, get it stretch a little bit. I think we're getting some stretching in the live audience, so this fits. The first yes-no question, do you support lifting the current easement on the Park Hill Golf Course? Please stand if yes. Thank you. Please stand if no. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Let's move on. And again, I will ask our candidates, even though yes-no questions are hard, because usually in politics the answer is it depends. If 51-49, please go one way or the other. Next yes-no question, do you support the current urban camping ban? Please stand if yes. Thank you. Please stand if no. Thank you, everybody. We're keeping rolling. Thank you. Next yes-no question, have you ever held elected political office? Please stand if yes. Thank you. Please stand if no. Thank you. Snaps are noise too, everybody. Let's keep going with our yes and no questions. Does Denver have enough public green spaces? Please stand if yes. Please stand if no. Thank you. Next question, should police department funding be increased? Please stand if yes. Thank you. Please stand if no. Thank you. Going to our next yes-no question. If state law allows, would you support any form of rent control measures? Please stand if yes. Thank you. Please stand if no. Thank you. Next yes-no question. Do you feel Denver has built and managed bike lanes correctly? Please stand if yes. Please stand if yes. Please stand if no. Thank you. Last yes or no question for this round. Should it be harder to drive in downtown Denver? Please stand if yes. Please stand if no. Should it be harder to drive in downtown Denver? Less cars. Thank you, everybody. Hope the candidates enjoyed stretching the legs a little bit. Let's keep going. I appreciate everyone's attention with this. This is very important, and I appreciate everything the candidates are providing for us. We're going to keep on target and on time. Our next topic is growth. The first candidate that will join us for the topic of growth is Thomas Wolf. The first question is this, and this, like most of our questions tonight, were offered by our community. I want to give our community a quick shout out for offering these questions and thank them for the participation. We were overwhelmed with those. Yes, we can acknowledge the community there. We were overwhelmed with their questions, and we're grateful for that. This we took verbatim. And again, this is going to be going to Thomas Wolf first. This is I live in Denver with my 12-year-old, and I'm an advocate for safe, dignified streets. I feel hopeless about Denver ever meeting its Vision Zero goals and living up to its stated transportation. What would you do as soon as you took office to get us closer to our Vision Zero goals and truly prioritize pedestrians?
I think the first thing I've seen in studies is to electrify our fleet. That's the biggest pickup towards this goal. Safety on the streets. I think the issue we just went through with the sidewalks, that isn't provided by your city, and it had to go to a ballot where an outside agency is going to now work at the provision of sidewalks. That's an absolute failure.
Thank you. Thomas Wolf, rebuttal. Next candidate will be joining us is Kwame Spearman. Kwame, the question again, what would you do as soon as you took office to get us closer to our Vision Zero goals and prioritize pedestrians?
I am so excited to be your neighborhood mayor, and this is the perfect question for our neighborhoods. We've got to go into each and every one of our neighborhoods and ask what they want for transportation. Some neighborhoods, quite frankly, like the ones that I grew up in, there aren't that many pedestrians walking around, but neighborhoods like the one I live in Whittier, we've got to have more sidewalks, we've got to have more micro-mobility. Downtown, I didn't quite understand the driving question, but we got to focus on bikes. We've got to focus on people walking, and we've got to focus on eliminating the brown cloud. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebuttal. Next question goes to Renata Behrens. Renata, the question again, what would you do to get us closer to our Vision Zero goals and truly prioritize pedestrians?
I would build the sidewalks, of course, but there is a problem. If the sidewalks are owned by the city, they have to be maintained by the city. And who can do that? Community work. Let's do it by the prisoners. We have lots of them, and they owe us something. And in winter time, it's even worse because you cannot step in onto a bus because the ice and the snow is not being removed, and you can break all your bones before you are in the
Thank you. Thank you, Renata. Rebuttal? Moving forward, next candidate to join us is Terrence Roberts. Terrence, again, the question, what would you do as soon as you took office to get us closer to Vision Zero goals and prioritize pedestrians?
I think the city of Denver needs to, of course, like the candidate said, make sure we have great walkable sidewalks. It should not be a ballot measure for us to fix our sidewalks, especially around places like Windsor Gardens. I am for bike lanes. We just need to make sure they're in the proper place and that they're helping to get people on bikes safely through our city streets. Some of them are placed improperly. That's why I didn't answer that question. We also need to work with RTD to have more energy efficient buses, clean energy buses, buses with great schedules, and more train systems to get more cars off of our streets.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Chris? Chris Hansen with rebuttal.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, those are all great answers, but Vision Zero is about reducing deaths of bikers and pedestrians, and no one has mentioned the epidemic of distracted driving we have on our streets. Next time you stop at a stoplight, look left, look right. How many people are on their phones texting or doing something that takes their attention away from the street? Hundreds of people every year are dying in the state. I brought the bill last year to try to end that practice. My colleague up here on the stage wouldn't even bring it to a vote in the House of Representatives. We passed it out of the House in a bipartisan support. We are missing the biggest problem on our streets right now, distracted driving.
Thank you. Chris Hansen with rebuttal. Renata? We'll get to all rebuttals. Renata Behrens, this is your third rebuttal.
I think the problem is we need public transportation, free, right now, for everybody. Then every commuter can leave their car at home and they have a stress-free ride to the job and can work more efficiently. And this is a solution for the brown cloud in Denver. The air pollution will be decreased, and someday we can breathe freely and don't have asthma anymore.
Thank you, Renata Behrens. Rebuttal, further rebuttal? This is your third?
Yeah, this is my last one, but an issue that I've been working on for more than a decade. I'm actually a survivor of being hit by a car when I was 7 years old. I sat on the Mayor's Bicycle Advisory Committee and worked to build the very first bike lane in Denver. Vision Zero isn't about people's behavior, it's because our infrastructure is dangerous by design. That is a basic principle of Vision Zero, and so for my bike advocates watching, believe me, I want to take on our high injury network. This is a term about where the most accidents are happening. It's on a very few amount of roads. We have to take action and use our resources there instead of waiting. Our plans need to be put in action.
Thank you. Ian Thomas IV, rebuttal. Next, any rebuttals? Moving forward to the next question under the growth topic, Andy Rougeau will be our first candidate. Parts of this city, including neighborhoods here in North Denver, have seen growth executed poorly with new builds that do not fit a neighborhood, among other problems. What is the most important problem around new construction that needs to be addressed by the city?
The most important problem facing new construction is we're not doing enough of it. We don't have enough homes for young families, for blue-collar workers, for first-time home buyers. It's not reasonable for people to commute in from 45 minutes to an hour away to not drop their kids off at school. That is a failure of the people up on the stage to not build enough housing. As mayor, I will fix our broken permitting department to make sure that we can build enough housing. I will get rid of regulations that are increasing the cost of housing and making our housing ugly. I will get money out of the process and fight for our future.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Next candidate will be Mike Johnston. Mike, the question again. What is the most important problem around new construction that needs to be addressed by the city?
I think this is one of the places where we realize how interconnected these challenges are, which is when you have a city where teachers or nurses or firefighters can't afford to live, what do? They live 10 or 20 or 30 miles outside of town, and they have to commute into the city every single day, which means you have more congestion, you have more traffic, you have more challenges and impact on climate. This is why we have to take a stand and actually be able to build affordable units in the city where all the people who serve the city can afford to live. That's what I would do, and put those next to transit-oriented development sites so people can be able to both take light rail, take the bus, and then walk and use bikes when they're downtown.
Thank you. That was Mike Johnston. Rebuttal? Next candidate on this question is Leslie Herod. Leslie, the question, what is the most important problem around new construction that needs to be addressed by the city?
Well, you first mentioned the residents in North Denver and the construction that's happening, the bills that are happening around here. I think the number one thing that's the problem right now is that the community is not as engaged and at the table as they should be when these discussions and decisions are being made. So growth is happening without the people that actually live here. I think that's important. We also have to make sure, and in my administration, what we'll do in the first term is create a plan that brings people back to the neighborhoods they grew up in, so they can afford to live in these new builds, if you will, so that they actually reflect the community and bring the community back. That's a priority.
Thank you. It's Leslie Herod. Rebuttal? Aurelio Martinez. That is your third.
I say the last for the best, okay? Listen, this is the reason I'm running for mayor. This is the one reason I'm running for mayor, is to bring control back to the neighborhoods, to the neighborhood organizations, the people that live in this city, that's people that work in this city, and the small businesses that are suffering in this city. We have to have them stop being ignored. This city administration ignores you. And we have to stop that. You have to have control as to what happens in your neighborhood and what affects your neighborhood. And that's my priority.
Thank you. Aurelio Martinez, thank you. Any further rebuttal? Next candidate on this question is Trinidad Rodriguez. Trinidad, the question, what is the most important problem around new construction that needs to be addressed by the city?
The biggest problem is permitting delays. We've got to cut the red tape. We've got to make this process to get permits way more efficient. Costs are being driven up on projects, and they are taking longer, way longer to complete. We actually have a homeless population who are just waiting for their homes to be completed. The way we do this is by using experts in logistics and bringing those experts in by either...
Thank you very much. Further rebuttal? Okay, moving on with the growth topic to our next question. The first candidate for our next question in growth will be Kelly Bruff. With the pandemic changing the way everyone works, such as increasing remote and hybrid work situations, nearly all cities are needing to rethink how to manage its downtown core. What are the most important considerations in managing the next 10 years of Denver's downtown core?
Today, we're probably at 50% of our workforce being downtown, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And we have retail and restaurants who have grown to be able to support services for 100%. We have to transition our office buildings as quickly as possible to residential. So we reactivate downtown. We also have to make sure that we house and shelter people so they're not living on our streets, because I think it makes our downtown more welcoming. And the combination of people living there, visitors coming back, and not limiting traffic going downtown yet would be very important on the yes/no question.
Thank you. That's Kelly Bruff. Rebuttal? Next candidate joining us for this question is Chris Hansen. Chris, what are the most important considerations in managing the next 10 years in Denver's downtown core?
Yeah, this is a moment for reinvention. We are coming out of the pandemic. We are at very low levels of occupancy downtown. The biggest buildings in the upper downtown are now being vacated by their owners. We have to reimagine. It does include more residences. It includes the redevelopment that's going to add lots of new housing opportunities in and near downtown. That's how we reactivate. That's how we remake the great Denver that we all want and love. And I think that's our path to reinventing ourselves. The new normal's gone. We've got to recreate with more residences and more activity, and I can't wait to do that as your mayor.
Thank you, Chris Hansen. Next candidate, rebuttal, Andy Rougeau. This is your last one.
The issue facing downtown is not what we just heard. It is not enough tax breaks. It's not how we're converting commercial office space. It's a lack of safety. Right now, if you go downtown, you do not feel safe. That is why, as mayor, I will enforce our camping ban. I'll add 400 police officers, make it safe downtown again, so businesses aren't leaving Union Station and moving to Cherry Creek. So people don't say they don't feel safe getting out of their car and walking to the restaurant on a Saturday evening. Thank you for your support, and that's why I'll fight for Denver's future.
Thank you. For the rebuttal? Next candidate for this question is Aurelio Martinez. Aurelio, again, what are the most important considerations in managing the next 10 years of Denver's downtown core?
Boy, I wanted this question. Thank you. Everything that's going on downtown has to be scrapped, okay? You can't just say we're going to give free rent, less rent to bring businesses back downtown, because it doesn't work. If they don't have a clientele, if they don't have a customer base downtown, it doesn't work. It's not going to work. We have to redo 16th Street Mall so it becomes attractive, and we have to put attractions downtown, something like the Sky Drops, something like the zip line you see up there. We have to make it.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Aurelio. Rebuttal. Exactly. That's a good question. Who's going to rebut that? Let's get to our next candidate. Thank you. Our next candidate is Ian Thomas Tafoya. Ian, the question again, what are the most important considerations in managing the next 10 years of Denver's downtown core?
Well, growing up here in Denver, I rode the bus to my job at the Museum of Nature and Science, and I transferred the bus and used to even use the payphones. We've come a long way since then. I do think we need to support the small businesses as we add housing. I agree with that. But there is also a lot of housing taking place outside of what we consider the commercial district. Look at what's happening at the Pepsi Center. We have a huge responsibility to ensure that there's more connectivity across the river so that people can come into the downtown area who don't have the access now in a safe way, and it's not in a car.
Thank you. It's Ian Thomas Tafoya. Any rebuttal? Moving forward to our next question, the first candidate for our final question in growth will be Jim Walsh. Jim, the last question is, many neighborhoods in Denver have had ethnic and cultural traditions disappear due to gentrification. Do you feel any steps need to be taken by the city to protect cultural heritage within Denver's neighborhoods?
Absolutely, 100%. I think whoever the next mayor is needs to pour resources into this. There's many neighborhoods in the community. I've been a North Sider for 26 years, and when I moved here, everyone on my block, there was great economic diversity. That's all gone. The people that used to be my neighbors have moved out, and they've been replaced by very young, very well-to-do couples. So I think we need to restore that.
Thank you. Is Jim Walsh, rebuttal? Next candidate joining us is Debbie Ortega. Debbie, the question, do you feel any steps need to be taken by the city to protect cultural heritage within Denver's neighborhoods?
Absolutely. I live in one of the neighborhoods that has changed drastically. My neighborhood doesn't look anything like what it used to. I think we need to continue to find ways to preserve our historic properties, and we now include cultural contributions as part of that, so that we are working very hard so that people who have lived in these neighborhoods that, or maybe have left, come back, don't even recognize their neighborhoods. So I think preserving our properties through historic designation is a big part of how we do that.
Thank you. It's Debbie Ortega, rebuttal. Next candidate joining us is Robert Tretta. Robert, question, do you feel any steps need to be taken by the city to protect cultural heritage within Denver's neighborhoods?
Oh, sure. Yeah, steps need to be taken. However, the reality of it is, I know many people that have sold out of the neighborhood of the Highlands for $500,000 for the house to be knocked down. These people leave the community with a chunk of money, and then a developer comes in, or a builder. I'm not a developer, and we'll build a brand new house on that property. We have to figure out what we can do to make those people, to keep those people to stay.
Thank you. Rebuttal, Kelly, it's your last one.
It strikes me this is an incredible opportunity to think about our park space and our open spaces, and for our community to begin to shape those spaces so they're culturally relevant and spaces that people want to visit from across the city. I would focus on doing just that throughout Denver.
Thank you. Further rebuttal? Last candidate join us on this question is Lisa Calderon. Lisa, the question, do you feel any steps need to be taken by the city to protect the cultural heritage within Denver's neighborhoods?
Absolutely, and that's why I ran for the first time in 2019 and came in third. Our Black and Latino communities are at the highest rate of displacement. Our cultural communities are disappearing. We couldn't get this administration to listen to the urgency of what we were feeling. We also know that our creative class is being pushed out. If they are not able to afford a place to live here, much less a space to rent, they are going to other places. Santa Fe Drive is our first cultural place, and we need to recognize and to keep people here.
Thank you. It's Lisa Calderon. Rebuttal? Mike Johnson, it's your last rebuttal.
One of the things we have to do to protect these communities is to make sure that the families that have lived there historically are able to stay there. And that means being able to purchase a home. One of the reasons why we know we have such dramatic wealth gaps in this city is because for 400 years we've denied particularly Black and African American families a chance to own homes. And the biggest gap to doing that was the inability to get down payment. That's why I helped launch a fund called the Deerfield Fund, which is designed to help families get access to down payments so they can get into homes and stay in the neighborhoods where they were raised. What I would do as mayor is expand that program citywide so we can make sure all of those folks who want to stay in the neighborhoods they grew up have the chance to own a home where they grew up.
Thank you. Further rebuttal? Okay, let's get to our last general topic of debate. This is going to be the topic of the environment. Our first candidate to join us in this round is going to be Thomas Wolf. Thomas, this question in environment, how can we make both single-family homes and multi-family housing more energy efficient in order to reduce the emissions?
I don't get to use the fleet answer again, I guess, and that was the wrong answer to the other question. So if you're keeping score at home. I was actually on the board where we built the MCA, the Contemporary Art Museum, and we followed some of the LEED protocols, and we were the first museum that got LEED certification, which was really interesting. I think a lot of those processes and material choices are a good guidelines for that. The trick is to getting that they're economic at scale. I think in some of the city projects they can do that to be kind of the leader in that.
Thank you. There's Thomas Wolf. Next candidate to join us is Jim Walsh. Jim, the question, how can we make both single-family homes and multifamily housing more energy efficient in order to reduce emissions?
I think a lot of this comes down to education. I've been an educator for 27 years, and much of this is just knowledge of what practices and processes to use to make your home more energy efficient. And that comes down to everything from when to turn the heat up, when to turn it down, what to use for insulation, windows, all of that. So just education would be my focus.
Thank you. This is Jim Walsh. Rebuttal. Next candidate will join us is Robert Tretta. Robert, same question. How can we make both single-family homes and multifamily housing more energy efficient?
Okay, guys, I'm the only builder here. 27 years, I started my own business. I've built the most energy efficient house in the city of Denver. The address is 4531 Beach Court. Google it, Google Earth it. You'll see 28 solar panels on that house. I drive 63,000 miles with my Tesla on those solar panels, only with the solar. It's crazy that we're talking about building energy efficient homes. I know how to do it, guys. Okay, just let me do it.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you. Rebuttal? Next candidate join us, Ian Thomas Tafoya. Ian, the question, how can we make both single-family homes and multifamily housing more energy efficient?
Well, this again is one of those questions where there's a lot of components to it. I will like to say that I've been named by 303 Magazine the candidate with the most environmental experience out of everyone on this stage. I actually passed a law in 2017 called the Denver Green Roof Initiative, which required solar panels and green roofs to lower energy and produce energy on the largest multifamilies. The other components are about financial literacy. It does come back to education. We have to show you all of the resources that are available now from the federal and state level that you can lower your energy bills, which is also a part of how you stay in your home.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Chris, this is your third.
Yeah, thank you. I think my record of the state legislature speaks for itself. I have led the effort to decarbonize and reduce greenhouse gas emissions in this state. I continue to do that work in the state Senate. And we are a national leader because of the great teamwork we've had at the state capitol over the last 3 years. That has resulted in huge environmental gains for this state, and I want to continue that work as your mayor. And I've got a plan to do that. I can't wait to share more about that as we continue this line of questioning. Environment is a huge priority for this city.
Thank you. That's Chris Hansen. For the rebuttal? Moving forward, this is a fresh question, and our candidate to join us for this question is Kwame Spearman. Kwame, as RTD continues to cut services and struggle, more residents have called for individual cities to step up mass transit efforts. How would your administration tackle mass transit issues?
So I have a transit bill of rights on my website, kwamefordenver.com. Please check it out. I don't think our RTD is serving Denver well right now. And one of the first things as mayor is have an honest conversation with our city about how we can influence RTD to actually represent Denver. We need more micro routes. We need different types of transportation, and we need better security on the RTD options that we have in place right now. We also need to do our own thing on micro mobility. The e-bike rebate is fantastic. We've got to do it. And Robert said he's going to let me borrow his Tesla, so that'll help as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, rebuttal. Next candidate to join us is Andy Rougeau. Andy, same question. When you, how would your administration tackle mass transit issues?
So Kwame is right. RTD is struggling right now. I talked to an RTD driver who'd been mugged 3 times in the past year driving his bus. We had a story in the Washington Post running nationally about how unsafe our RTD is. We can't meet our climate goals unless it's safe to use mass transit in our city. That's why, as mayor, I will fight for our future by ensuring that we have enough police officers to keep our RTD safe, by making sure we have enough drivers, by making sure they're safe on their buses. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Andy Rougeau. Rebuttal. Next candidate is Trinidad Rodriguez. Trinidad, how would your administration tackle mass transit issues?
This is a hugely exciting opportunity for my administration. We will start by actually, for the first time, building our city around the transit infrastructure that we can leverage to much greater effect, much more efficiency, and much higher quality of lives. Secondly, using technology, promising technologies like self-driving, but don't let it happen for single occupancy vehicles like this one over here. Let's use it for people movers. Let's restrict the use of that technology to people movers so that we're moving people much more frequently and safely.
Thank you, Trinidad Rodriguez. Rebuttal? Moving forward, Terrence Roberts. Terrence, how would your administration tackle mass transit issues?
I actually spoke on this earlier in one of my answers about bike lanes. So just for clarity, the city of Denver does not govern RTD. They have their own governance and their own elected board members, just like we do not govern DPS. But we do need to make sure that they have efficient buses. We need to make sure that they have better bus routes. We need a better train system. We need a train system from Denver to Central City and beyond. We need a train system going north, south, east, and west out of our metro area to make sure that we get cars off of the streets and it's safe for walkers, rollers, and bikers.
Thank you. Terrence Roberts, rebuttal. Debbie Ortega is our next candidate to join us. Debbie, how would your administration tackle mass transit issues?
So the city of Denver is already moving to do the bus rapid transit along the East Colfax corridor. As the mayor, I would be working with Aurora and with Jefferson County so that we have that line that goes from one end of the metro area to the other. That then changes how our bus system works, and our routes don't all have to come downtown. And then we close the gap for first mile, last mile by making sure that we have the connectivity using some of the modes of transportation that were mentioned earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Moving forward to our next question, Aurelio Martinez will be our first candidate on this next question. Despite Denver's aggressive environmental efforts, Denver continues to have poor air quality. How would you prioritize environmental efforts in your administration? What solutions would you champion?
First of all, Denver has to stop promoting highway traffic coming through our city. We have to have them use the C470 system so they can go around. That's what they were built for. As far as the RTD issue, we have to put more parking rides around that C470 system so that they are forced to come in, park and ride, and come in and stop the high traffic in Denver. It has to happen.
Thank you. It's Aurelio Martinez. Rebuttal. Next candidate to join us, Mike Johnston. How would you prioritize environmental efforts in your administration? What solutions would you champion about poor air quality?
Yeah, this is where our failure to take more courageous action on climate is actually now a public health issue. When you think about the fact that people who came to the state or stayed in the state because they love to be outdoors now have to worry if you can go for a hike in the summertime with your grandmother or your child because they may have exposure to contaminants, that's not the city that we want. We have to take more aggressive action. That means doing common sense things like incentivizing ways to get fossil fuels out of our economy, electrifying buildings, electrifying vehicles, providing incentives for things like e-bikes and electric vehicles, but also making sure that they're equitable. So we have things like community solar gardens for people that can't afford to put all those panels on their roof.
Thank you. That's Mike Johnston. Rebuttal. Leslie Harrod is our next candidate to join us. Leslie, how would you prioritize environmental efforts in your administration? What solutions would you champion specifically about poor air quality?
Well, as someone with asthma, I will say that when we have poor air quality days, it affects me directly and so many others. As was mentioned, we need to do more to make sure that more folks like me and you and so many others don't have asthma. One thing I will say is that when we have our bad ozone days, it means I can't even go outside to walk my dog. That's real for Denver. We think we're the greenest city in this nation. We are not. And I actually have to give my hat off to my colleague up here, Ian, who has been working at the state level to hold big polluters accountable. That's where we're going to find a reduction in bad ozone days in our city, is by holding those big polluters accountable. Thank you, Ian, for your work on that.
Thank you. That's Leslie Harrod. Rebuttal. Next candidate on this question is Chris Hansen. Chris, how would you prioritize environmental efforts in your administration? What solutions would you champion?
Thank you. I was so hoping to get this question. Done a lot of work on this at the state. Many of the things already mentioned tonight are things that I've helped legislate on. But specifically for Denver, we have a massive opportunity in front of us. Electrify our buildings using heat pumps and hot water heat pumps. This is a billion-dollar opportunity, multi-billion-dollar opportunity, tens of thousands of new jobs. And here's the great news. It's going to drastically reduce pollution, reduce the brown cloud, and we're going to pay ourselves to do it because it pays off when we've all just had to pay big natural gas prices. Wouldn't you like to have to stop doing that? Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. That was Chris Hansen. A rebuttal? I'm sorry, Renata, you don't have any more. Okay. Thomas, you do have one?
I'm over here? Or?
Right there.
Sorry. I'm always baffled on this one because these are for air and water quality standards. Those are federal rules. We have, I think, the largest EPA office outside of DC, about 2 blocks from my office in Lodo. Why are our elected officials not pressing the federal agencies against our biggest polluter, which is Suncor to the north of town, and confronting them on this? I mean, talk is cheap, but let's see some action.
Thank you. Further rebuttal? Okay, let's move on to our last question within the environment topic. Our first candidate will be answering this is Lisa Calderon. Sloan's Lake, a major attraction and economic generator for Denver's West Side metro area, is routinely unsafe for public use and has endured years of neglect. How would you ensure that your Parks Department allocates the resources needed for Sloan's and other parks facing similar challenges?
Well, as a fourth-generation Denverite who grew up riding my bike around Sloan's Lake and also serving on the Parks and Rec Board, it really is around having a Parks and Rec Board that has teeth. Right now, it really has no power or authority, and what we have is an appointee who then makes decisions for parks. We need to listen to the folks who use parks and really think about our park system as citywide rather than just the people who are around it. And so we need to have more input in how our parks policy is being developed.
Thank you. That was Lisa Calderon. Rebuttal. Moving forward, next candidate, Kelly Bruff. How would you ensure that your Parks Department allocates the resources needed for Sloan's and other parks facing similar challenges?
As voters, we approved a dedicated tax for our parks. I would prioritize work like at Sloan's Lake, where we know simple filters could address the water quality there and start to make the needed improvements immediately, and then develop a long-term plan for prioritizing how we're spending those dollars and making sure you're seeing them in your communities, the return on that ballot initiative that we approved.
Thank you. Rebuttal? Last candidate on this question, Renata Behrens. Renata, how would you ensure your Parks Department allocates the resources needed for parks facing these challenges?
Resources, okay. I would buy Excel that the citizens have affordable energy, and on the other hand, I would take care of the air pollution by free traffic, free public transportation, as I said before, free electric buses, and green.
Thank you. Okay, that's Renata Behrens. Thank you. Any rebuttal? That completes our environmental topic. We have now come to our closing statements, everybody. You've done a fantastic job as an audience. I want to thank you. Before we get to our candidates and their closing statements, I'd like to ask you to help me thank the only people working harder than these candidates tonight have been our 2 timekeepers, Allison and Emma. Please thank them. Thank you both very much for keeping us on time. We will go to our closing statements. We've allowed 1 minute for each candidate to offer a closing statement. We selected the order by drawing numbers out of a hat. That order gives us Leslie Herod. Leslie, please join us for your 1 minute closing statement.
Thank you, and I want to thank everyone for being here and my colleagues who are candidates here as well. I have a tattoo on my wrist. It says Nil Sine Numine. That's the Colorado State motto, nothing without providence or nothing without God. But for me, that means nothing without faith. Nothing without faith of ourselves, faith of our neighbors, faith to do things, that we can get things done. And as I stand here today, I know so many times people have said things that we cannot do over and over and over again, including some of my colleagues here today, things that can't be done. Don't believe that. If I believed what couldn't be done, I wouldn't be standing before you as a state representative today. I want to see you, not MIT. If I believed what they told me about myself, we wouldn't be fighting for things like police accountability and led the country in that fight right here because of protests that were happening day in and day out. And if we believe what they want you to believe today, they would say that we could not tackle affordable housing and our unhoused neighbors and our crises that are happening on our streets right now. We can. We can get more housing for people.
Thank you.
We can get the job done for Denver.
Thank you.
We will deliver. Thank you.
Our next candidate for their closing statement is Jim Walsh.
Thanks, everyone, for being here. This has been an amazing experience for me. I've never run for office, so this is kind of a crazy thing, you know. And but I've been biking all over the city. I call it my bread and roses tour, the old labor saying for those of you who've had any labor education. And there's this old labor song called "Which Side Are You On?" Has anyone ever heard it? And that is the foundation of my campaign. Which side are you on? Why have we never had a mayor on the side of workers in this city? What's going on? So I hope to be that mayor. I hope to support the collective bargaining rights of all public employees. I hope to support, to raise union density in this city. I hope to support worker-owned cooperatives. I hope to support worker centers so that our immigrant brothers and sisters have more protections. Universal basic income and harm reduction for all public health issues. Denver, workers first.
Thank you. It's Jim Walsh. Our next closing statement is Renata Behrens. Renata?
I would like to change the language of the government, especially on the ballot, so that every normal or average citizen can understand it. Secondly, I would ask you not to look down at the homeless people if you were not homeless yourself. And the third, I would like to ask the homeowner to get rid of their lawns. They are very energy intensive and water intensive, and they are good for nothing. Grow a little garden, or have somebody grow the garden on your property. And if you do not need the produce, give it to the homeless or the homeless kitchens. And the last one, I think you should vote that Denver gets the mayor that we all need. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Renata Behrens. Our next candidate is Terrence Roberts.
It's time in Denver that we move past yes, we can, and we need to implement yes, we will. Last year, our public safety budget was $566 million. That was 39% of our general fund. Only 2% of that went to housing, but every municipal candidate is focused on housing. Affordable housing. Affordable housing is affordable for who? Okay, we need more public housing. We need to make Denver a 24-hour city. No more three-term mayors. No one up here deserves to be mayor for 12 years. It is too hard to unseat an incumbent mayor. We need to change our city charter to add more democracy to our city. We need an elected police officials. We need an elected sheriff. We need an elected city attorney. We need to add more democracy to the city of Denver. Our housing issue is our main issue. It should not have only 2% of our budget as going to housing. We need a double-digit housing budget, and we need a public banking system to pay for more retrofitted or newly built public housing that will lower our violence. Thank you very much. Terrence Roberts for mayor.com.
Thank you. That's Terrence Roberts. Our next candidate is Aurelio Martinez.
First, I want to thank you all. Thank you for listening. And what I want to say, I mentioned earlier that my whole reason for running was for the residents that live in Denver, for the neighborhood organizations, for the workers and the small businesses in Denver. They have to be able to have a word in what happens to them in this administration. That's the reason I'm running. So I want to tell you, one thing that I'm going to do that's going to make that happen is I will put together an office of ombudsman and liaison, because the current administration that has community outreach people hasn't worked for 30, 40 years, and it's not going to work. But the job description of an ombudsman is to field every complaint, inquiry that comes into them, and they have to come up with resolution. They cannot just let it get stale and forget about it. They have to come up with resolution, has to put that resolution on my office, and it has to happen. Your word will be what happens in this city and happens in your neighborhoods.
Thank you.
amfdm.com.
Thank you. That was Aurelio Martinez. Our next candidate is Lisa Calderon.
I am running to be the first truly progressive candidate of Denver. We have had false choices for the past 2 administrations that have not put workers and residents first. And instead, I would like to share power with the community. We need to decentralize Denver government by moving resources into neighborhoods. We need to embed our services where people naturally congregate. So libraries, rec centers, we need to have one-stop shops for people who are struggling in this city. This is a race between the past power brokers and the future. And I want to fundamentally change the way power is wielded in this city. We should not have the same people who have been running the mechanisms in this city backing other candidates that's simply changing faces. We need a total transformation in leadership of Denver, and I'm the candidate to do that.
Thank you. That was Lisa Calderon. Let's get to our next candidate, Robert Tretta.
Oh yeah, you bet we need a transformation. We've needed a transformation for 15 years now. The city of Denver has almost put me out of business 3 times, not giving me my permits to do work. It's spilling over into everything. When I have to wait a year for building permits, I'm passing that cost along to you guys. You're gonna pay $100,000 for every new build you see out there. Building practices are ridiculous. The regulation is insane. The bureaucracy involved is crazy. It's adding to the homeless problem, every day. We need real change. I know how to do it. Climate, air quality, renewable energy. I lead by example. I don't just talk. I'm not a politician. I want some real results, and I want them now. And I will do them as soon as I take office. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Robert Tretta. Next candidate is Thomas Wolf.
So I'm running because I know Denver needs to be safe, clean, and smart. All right up there? And I think the city's anything but that. And the reason is it needs strong, competent, fresh management, fresh leadership. I have an analytical background. I was a student in science as well as finance, pop politics. I'm not very good at sound bites, but if you want to get to the core of issues and solve them so they stay solved, I'm your person. An example on this encampments, if you're okay with encampments, it's killing our property values in downtown Denver. If you're okay with that, that means 50% decrease. It's 50% of the budget for DPS, okay? It's 50% of my budget, or excuse me, it's 11 or 12% of my city budget as your mayor. If you're okay with encampments, heads up, that's coming, so you need to know that as well. Thomas Wolf, thank you.
Thank you, it was Thomas Wolf. Next candidate is Kelly Bruff.
Thank you all so much for giving us this chance tonight to spend time with you. I've told you a little about what I intend to do. I want to share with you how I work. Because my approach to solving issues is really about bringing the most diverse voices together, people who see the world differently, experts who've worked in these spaces, learning from our past, looking at what other cities have done, using data to guide our decisions. That's my approach to solving really challenging problems. It's why those 5 mayors in the metro area endorsed my homeless plan. It's why former manager of safety and police officer Al LaCabe, former executive of the ACLU Denise Maez, former governor and district attorney for Denver Bill Ritter have endorsed my public safety plan. It's recognizing the only way we're going to address these issues is if we come together as a community and find a path forward. Like others, I've never run for office before either, and I'm not going to run for another. This is it. But I have run the city of Denver, and I would love the chance to do it again with you.
Thank you. That's Kelly Brough. Next candidate is Chris Hansen.
It's such an honor to be with you tonight. I'm State Senator Chris Hansen, and I'm running to be your next mayor because I want to build a city that works. Right now, I'm feeling pretty frustrated, like many of you in the building and online joining us tonight. I'm feeling frustrated because the city is not working. I'm an engineer, I'm a private sector leader, I'm a public sector leader. I've gotten big things done over and over at the state capitol. I've managed multi-billion-dollar budgets in the private sector and the public sector. I know how to get things done. I'm asking for your support tonight to move Denver forward. I want to end with a story, though, one that's deeply personal. A couple months ago, I took my boys downtown. We jumped on the 15, and I immediately started getting questions. Dad, why is there a drug deal at the bus stop? Dad, why are there encampments all the way downtown? Why don't I feel safe in downtown? As a father, that is heartbreaking. We can't continue in this direction. I want to build a city that works, and I'm asking for your support.
Thank you.
Chris Hansen for Denver Mayor. Thanks, Dominic.
Thank you. That's Chris Hansen. Next candidate is Ian Thomas Tafoya.
I want to close by saying, hi, Mom. I know you're watching at home. But to all the RNOs who put this together, thank you so much. I've been an RNO president, and I've been involved in RNO, registered neighborhood organization politics, for more than a decade. My name's Ian Tafoya. I was a teacher. I've worked for 3 branches of local government. I've worked at all 3 levels of American government. I've brought people together to pass more than a dozen laws that have impacted the people of Denver when our leaders have failed. I believe that we do need to call everyone together. That is an ancestral belief of me as a Native American man. We have to call in all 4 directions: black, white, yellow, red, elders, youth. It's time that we do bring people together, and you need to elect people who rolled up their sleeves and went and picked up the trash during the pandemic. My name is Ian Thomas Tafoya. You can find out more about me at tafoyaformayor.com. You've seen the work that we've been able to do together. Imagine if we could do it every day, because together we rise and we do build back better. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Ian Thomas Tafoya. Next candidate is Debbie Ortega.
I want to thank Regis for hosting this tonight and all of the RNOs who are part of bringing us together. My commitment to service started when I was a young child, when my dad would help other miners, coal miners who were injured, and I would go with him to help deliver food and money to those workers. And that same service that he provided to them were reciprocated to my family. When my dad died when I was 5 years old, he was involved in an on-the-job injury. And just seeing the impact that he had on those families and those families had on mine, that is the commitment to service that I've had to this city over the years that I have been an elected official. I've worked in the trenches with our neighborhoods. I've been working to solve environmental and housing issues, and I could go on. But now is the time when this city needs someone who understands how this city works and has the skill set to make that happen.
Thank you.
DebbieOrtega.com.
Thank you. That was Debbie Ortega. Next candidate is Mike Johnston.
Thank you. When we all walk out of this debate tonight, we're going to walk back out into a city that we love. But the truth is, tonight in that city we love, half of us that live in this city can't afford to live here. Tonight in that city we love, 100 people will go to bed and wake up tomorrow and have their car gone. In that city we love, tonight 1,400 people are out right now trying to look for a place to sleep outside in the street. Why are we letting that happen, right? This is our home. The spirit of Denver is that we are not the victims of our own story, we're the authors of our own story. So the question is, what chapter are we going to write next? Are we going to write another chapter about this city as a city that didn't house all of us, or protect all of us, or include all of us? We're going to write a chapter about this city, which is one where your kids can dance all through downtown and you're not worried about their safety, where teachers and nurses and firefighters can live in this city again, where we know that everyone can feel safe. We've built this city once. We can rebuild it into a city that we love.
Thank you.
That's the chapter I intend to write. I'd love to be your next mayor.
Thank you. That's Mike Johnston. Next candidate is Kwame Spearman.
I'd like to ask everyone to do me a favor. Go home tonight and think about your neighborhood. Think about 2 things you love about your neighborhood. And think about 2 things your neighborhood needs to improve. I love our neighborhoods. We are an amazing city because of our neighborhoods. And I want to create a government where we go into our neighborhoods and we listen to our residents. We allow our residents to empower this city to its greatness. We ask our residents, what are your thoughts on safety, on housing, and on the local economy for your neighborhood? And then I want to create a city government that is responsive to that, that has goals around that. Because I can tell you, as a CEO, the only way that you can accomplish great things is you've got to have a strong vision, a strong team, and you've got to make everyone feel seen and be heard. We can do that in this city, and we're going to do it through our neighborhoods. Thank you. Kwame for Denver.com. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. That was Kwame Spearman. Our next candidate is Trinidad Rodriguez.
I was born and raised in West Denver by a hardworking single mom. It was a neighborhood that was rich in love, but money was tight. We had faced housing instability, addiction, violence personally. But this city helped us actually through those tough times, and I wanted to pay it forward. So when I started my career in finance 25 years ago, I started giving and serving the entire time our city's most important and efficient civic and nonprofit organizations. My financing and my leadership helped build affordable housing communities, hospitals, clinics, and schools that went on to serve tens of thousands of Denverites. It is we are ready to build my vision of a city where every Denverite, regardless of the neighborhood they're in, can go on to their version of success. TrinidadForDenver.com.
Thank you. That's Trinidad Rodriguez. Our last candidate of the night for his closing statement, Andy Rougeau.
Almost done, everybody. So my name is Andy Rougeau. I'm running for mayor of Denver because I love this city. It's the city where I settled down after the Army. I came to Denver when I came back from a deployment to Afghanistan with the Rangers, and I moved in with my now wife. It's the city where I built a business. I grew a business from 12 employees to nearly 50, a blue-collar business, fixing gates for self-storage units where I'd come home covered in sweat and grease, and I couldn't hug my wife until I'd taken a shower. It's the city where I'm raising a family. I've got 2 amazing little girls. And our mayor and our city council and some of the politicians behind me are taking that opportunity away from the next generation. They are taking that opportunity away by letting skyrocketing crime, skyrocketing homelessness, and unaffordability of housing in our city to crowd us out. As mayor, I will fight for our future by making sure we're adding 400 police officers to our streets, by making sure we're enforcing our camping ban, and making sure we're building enough housing in our city. Join me at andyfordenver.com and learn on how I'm going to fight for our future. Thank you.
Thank you. Please join me in thanking all of our candidates tonight. Our thanks to all of our candidates, our thanks to all of you here at Regis University and everyone watching online. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to vote. April 4th is Election Day. For everybody here for CBS News Colorado and Regis University, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Good night.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate your answers.
Thank you.